What is going on, everybody? It's your boy John, and welcome back to Gearbox. So today we are back on the topic of aviation. If you didn't see my last video, I would suggest pause this, go to that one, and then come right back to this video as kind of a follow-up. What I'm referring to there is basically talking about what are some things you should keep in mind if you're looking to get your private pilot's license. Obviously, there's the rules and regulations and what all you need to legally have done. But I kind of wanted to give a little bit of my insight into a couple things that you wouldn't necessarily think of, but would definitely be helpful to keep in mind while pursuing that private pilot license. And now we're going to do the same thing with your instrument rating. So if you haven't watched that first video, go do that. Come here. It's going to be a good one. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into point number one. So the first piece of advice I would give anyone pursuing their instrument rating is pick a plane and stick with it. Now, what do I mean by that? Really, I'm not just talking about, oh, you're flying 172, so stay in a 172, or you're flying Archer, so fly an Archer. That's a part of it. But what I really mean is have that specific plane with that specific avionics, that being the key point, and fly that one. Now, I had the luxury at my flight school down the road here where we had about 2.5 172s is what I was flying that were all outfitted with the G5s, the 650, and you could pretty much hop in between, plane to plane, just depending on maintenance windows and availability and all that sort of stuff. Now, what's also important to keep in mind is I don't care if a plane is the same exact model, type, whatever, they are going to fly different. And there are a couple factors in that. So one example is one of the 172s at my flight school had a, standard kind of all-encompassing propeller, for lack of a better term, good at climbs, good in cruise, so on and so forth, just based on the pitch of the actual blade, since we're not flying a constant speed. Now, one of the 172s that I had the option to fly, outfitted with the same avionics, had a cruise prop. Now, why is this important? It really didn't make a whole lot of a difference, except for in a climb. And that becomes an issue when we are practicing missed approaches. I could go into 1,000,001 stories. I hated it, so I just wanted to stick to my plane, be comfortable with that, be comfortable with the avionics, and I think it helped me out in the long run. So that's going to be point number one. Pick a plane and stick to it. The second piece of advice I'd give anyone pursuing their instrument rating is practice phraseology. A lot of times in aviation, whether we're talking private pilot, instrument, commercial, whatever, you hear the phrase, get ahead of the plane, and those are definitely words to live by. But another thing to use to get ahead of the plane is understand what air traffic control is about to throw your way so you can respond in a clear and concise manner, and then you can focus on the actual flying part of things. Obviously, being an instrument pilot, there's a ton of conversation back and forth between ATC, and a lot of the conversation is heavy, dense material. Cross Owaxu at or above 3,000 feet, clear for the ILS-2 into blank airport, blah, 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 whatever. It's not difficult once you've done it, but early on, it's tough. And I would practice as I'm driving to work, or I would watch YouTube videos of just air traffic control chatter and get used to spitting that stuff back, or, writing down clearances, reading clearances back. In my opinion, the phraseology and the air traffic control stuff was the most nerve-wracking part of flying, believe it or not. Hopefully, some of you guys are in the same boat as me, but the more you practice, the easier it gets, and it's going to become less of a burden on you to actually focus on flying the approaches and flying your instrument flight plan. The third point I want to make here today is to study. Of course, everyone's going to be studying as they're getting up to their written or as they're getting ready for their check ride. But one of the things that helped me a ton is continuously studying. not just cramming the night before for the written or, the night before for the check ride. Constantly study, whether that's reading over plates or reciting marvelous VFR back to your head or whatever. It doesn't need to be a super strenuous study, but always, continue to look at this material and make it become second nature. The less thinking you can do in the cockpit while flying on an instrument flight plan, especially while in IMC, the better off you're going to be. So study, make it second nature, and you can thank me later. The fourth point I want to talk about today is kind of a universal concept. I know I talked about it in the private pilot video as well, but I feel like it's even more exacerbated in the instrument, but fly consistently. With the mental gymnastics that happen in a instrument, training session, you're going from point A to point B and you're doing 1,000,001 approaches, 1,000,001 missed approaches, you're getting alternate missed instructions, you're climbing, you're descending, you're talking to air traffic control, you're doing this, you're doing that, oh, you have partial panel, blah, 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 blah. It's a lot of information, especially from the standpoint of just the avionics. I'm flying the RNAV LPV approach into whatever airport, we go missed. What do? How do I make sure that GPS is in sync with what we are doing, so that way you don't have a bad cross-reference on your GPS? There's a lot of stuff that it needs to happen upstairs, and the only way it's going to happen is by flying consistently. Great example of this. One of the main approaches that we focused on, especially as we got closer to my check ride, was the VOR DME arc into Elbert County, Georgia. That was the only DME arc, in a far away land. But a part of that arc, once we got on the actual inbound course, was you had to dive and drive the plane to get down to your fixes. And on top of that, the approach course was about 30 degrees offset from the actual course of the runway, which made it even more challenging. But the whole concept of diving and driving really didn't make sense to me. So being able to fly consistently, do that approach over and over again, that's going to be the muscle memory that gets you across the finish line when it comes time for your check ride. The fifth and final point I want to make here today is going to be a very, very important one. Now, before I get into it, I am not telling anyone to practice unsafe flying or make themselves uncomfortable or whatever. Fly at your own risk and make sure that you're comfortable with your aeronautical decision making and stuff like that. But challenge yourself on your personal minimums. This is very, very important. Once we got our private pilot's license, we pretty quickly, or at least I did, quickly developed personal minimums, whether it's cloud layer, whether it's visibility, whether it's crosswind component based on the plane we're flying, whatever. And that is all very, very good stuff. That makes for a safe pilot. Now, one of the struggles I had while getting into my instrument rating was the concept that the whole idea of instrument flying is flying in less than ideal weather, right? i.e., my personal minimums would not allow me, my minimums were so high that no actual IMC time would be logged. And obviously, once again, it takes a while to get comfortable in that setting. Your instructor is going to play a big part in that. But one of the best things that my instructor did throughout all of our training was he pushed me to challenge myself. A lot of times it was windy days. And by windy, I mean gusting 27 in a 172. But there were also days with lower ceilings or, actual IMC at our flight level, whatever the case may be. And it's scary initially. The whole concept of flying in the clouds, in IMC, not having a horizon, you start to feel all the inner ear stuff, and it's interesting. But the only way you can get comfortable doing it is by doing the damn thing. And the best time to do it is when you have an instructor with you or a safety pilot or whatever, and you do it. In my instrument rating, we logged about 8.5 hours of IMC. Prior to that, my instructor only had 4 hours. It was a lot, and it was very, very tough to make me feel comfortable as a pilot, because at the end of the day, my instructor did not force me to do anything. He pushed me to do it, but he said, at the end of the day, you are the pilot in command. You need to make a decision if this is a go or a no-go. And after a little bit of back and forth internally, I was able to figure that out. But because of that experience and all that sort of stuff, I am super grateful for that. And now I can say that my personal minimums have dropped, safely dropped, but dropped based on my comfortability flying an instrument flight plan. And that's exactly what we are setting out to do by getting our instrument rating in the first place. So guys, that is going to do it for another episode of Gearbox. I could talk about this stuff for days and days and days. So if you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop them in the comment section down below. Whether we're talking private pilot, instrument, commercial, whatever, these are all big, big steps in our journey in aviation. So as much as I can, help you reach those goals or, just give you that much more information going into it, that's what I'm here to do and try my best at doing it the best that I possibly can. So once again, questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the comment section down below. If you like this video, give it a big fat thumbs up. And as always, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. You know the drill. And until next time, peace.